Started. Welcome to another lecture in the Dawn of the Data Age series. This is on accelerating CX. That abbreviation, if you are not familiar with it, means customer experience. So accelerating customer experience research with Agile methods. I'm Luciano Pesci. I'm the founder and CEO of Emperitas. We're a team of economists and data scientists that focus on customer lifetime value insights for our clients. I'm also the founder and director of the Utah Community Research Group at the University of Utah, where I teach econ and data and analytics and research-focused courses. So I'll bring both of those experiences to bear today on this advice. As with the other lectures in this series, there will be three parts today. First, we're going to talk about the benefits of Agile in customer experience research, why you should even consider this. It's not actually a very prevalent term at the moment. It's not something that's being done. In fact, I was surprised that the landing page, so as a quick side note on marketing, the landing page for this lecture, which has only been on the internet for about 2 weeks, because we do these lectures every 2 weeks, that is the second organic ranked position on Google right now if you search Agile customer experience research. I was shocked how easy it was to rank on that term. There were 2 ads, and then there were 2 organic results. The one ahead of us was Forrester. This is not something, the point being, this is not something a lot of people are looking at right now in the customer experience world, and they should be, because there are huge benefits. Then the second part will be, what does an Agile sprint look like? I will show you a 1-month version. This actually comes from a past lecture that we've done for product managers, but I will show you what that sprint actually looks like, and then I will explain at the end how you can adopt Agile. And this is where we will spend probably most of the time. But how would you actually make this transition? If most people are not doing this, we can dominate the search results, the search engine result page for a 2-week window on this topic. It means that people are not paying attention to this. And yet we had a lot of interest in this lecture, a lot of signups. So let's talk about those benefits first. CX is a pretty cool looking abbreviation. It's an interesting term. It's a sexier way of saying customer service, and that's really what it is. Customer experience management comes out of the customer service world. When you transition from physical products, this probably happened in the 90s and early 2000s, but when you transition in the economy from physical products that didn't need a lot of interaction after the purchase between the individual and the brand, the organization. When that transitioned to software as a service, or ServSoft is the next one, services with software, when that transitioned into this different economy, now suddenly the communication between the customer and the brand was happening constantly. And that brought to the attention of the organization the importance of managing that experience. And this is where customer experience management came from. Okay, but it's still using, and it is built on the foundations of market research, which means most of the methods that are being applied are 50 plus years old. If you want to go become a member of the MRA, they're going to have you read Malhotra's Marketing Research. Marketing Research is the textbook I use at the University of Utah when I teach this course on market research methods. It's the Bible when it comes to market research. Those methods have not largely been updated in 50 or 60 years. If you want to see the origins of them, go watch the show Mad Men. They will show it. It's called marketing research because it was marketing departments that really pioneered a lot of this stuff. And it became the foundation for what we consider now today market research. They're very antiquated approaches. They don't take into consideration the fact that you can now understand an individual in immense detail as a person through simple searches on things like Google. That's a new reality for your research purposes. And market research has not done well to keep pace with this technological change. Now this is probably one of the best pieces of content I've ever come across on the internet, and I'm skeptical of a lot of content. I consider a lot of it mirage content. In fact, we talked about that in the Data Drive Your Content Strategy lecture where we had Trevor Crump from Alliance Health, now known as Upwell, come and co-lecture. There's a lot of mirage content out there. It promises to be good, but it isn't. This piece is the best 20 minutes that you could spend today. is go read this. PricewaterhouseCoopers, if you don't know who they are, they're a massive, massive services consulting agency. They see these problems happening across all verticals, across all organization types, and they said that the next era in customer experience will have to be built intelligently, which implies that you have data. They're calling this the intelligent experience economy. I believe it's true. Personalization is the key, not just to a better brand experience, but from an economic standpoint, from an economic theory standpoint. If you can understand every customer as an individual, you can then charge different prices for different services. You have to customize those services, where people get very mad, but you become a price setter. You're not in a competitive market anymore. You're a monopoly. And that ability is something that brands are constantly trying to push towards. This is a way to actually do it. Use data to understand the individual and customize the experience to them. The whole purpose of this piece is to motivate you in that direction. It is well worth the 20 minutes I'm going to talk about a lot of what it says today. But this is the new standard. If all you're doing is the old customer service approach to customer experience, then it's just like using these old, outdated, antiquated market research methods. This need for agility, and I want to be clear on these terms here. Agile is a principle. Things like Scrum or Kanban, those are applications of the principle. The principle of Agile is that you need to be moving faster. Market research is particularly bad in this case. It is not uncommon for projects to take 4 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months. And there are still some technological limits that mean that if you want to do these large studies, you're probably still at a 4-month window. It's going to get shorter and shorter as time goes on, but it still takes some time to do discrete choice modeling. It still takes some time to do real clustering through some sort of survey collection. But most of what you're doing in your customer experience could be done in 2 weeks, not in 10 months. And so this is where Agile came in, and there was a competition within these SaaS companies of who could get the better product to market first. And because of that, they started to adopt all of these different approaches for rapid testing, validating, and deploying new products, new services, new ideas. And that has spread to the rest of the organization. But the purpose of saying Agile today is to focus on this. How can you just move faster? I've already talked about the origin of SaaS companies. I think if you haven't joined us in the past, one lecture that's worth going and looking at, if you came to today or you're interested in today, then this other lecture that's linked in the bottom left here would be something that if you spend 45 minutes watching the video, you're going to get a lot out of it. Most of what we're going to talk about today is a repackaged version of, in the actual application of a sprint, of what we have done for product managers. Now, the other reason that Agile methods work so well is not just that they're faster, is that it allows you to respond quicker. If you're waiting for 10 months, if you get conditioned to the idea that you can wait 10 months for some of this information and then you act, and that's going to put you and keep you in a competitive position, I think you're delusional. Things are happening instantaneously right now. And Agile allows you to pivot very quickly when you see this happening. So a 2-week sprint, a 4-week sprint, whatever you're going to use, you will immediately start to see some of the big things that need to be fixed. You can start fixing them right then. You didn't have to wait for another 9 months and 2 weeks to figure out that you needed to do something. You figured it out at that moment, 2 weeks in. And this will also keep you focused on what matters. Often, this is not uncommon at all with market research projects. You think you have one problem, you set this very large goal with a very long timeline, and you work towards it. And then you get there and you realize, oh, that wasn't the problem we had to begin with. We had a different kind of problem. Well, you'll discover that in 2 weeks instead of 10 months. The other reason that Agile is necessary in this new era is that customer preferences, which is what your customer experience needs to be built on. I'm going to talk about customer value proposition here in a moment. But what you are doing is fulfilling a preference for your customer. They need something from you. They want something from you. That is constantly changing. So if you build a customer experience system and you just put it in place and let it go, it will become antiquated and unuseful very quickly, because this is a moving target, and it's something that I pointed out in both in LinkedIn article recently, but also in one of our past lectures, is that you don't get to determine anymore as an individual who is interacting with these customers. They're not comparing you to you and your competitors. They're not saying, how is my experience with you different from two of your competitors that I've worked with before? That's not how the customer experience comparison happens anymore. Now a customer, and it doesn't matter by vertical or sector, they're going to look at any experience they've ever had. The Chase Bank app is affecting how they assess you. Might be totally unrelated to you, but that customer experience of using that app is something that they will compare you to, even if you have nothing to do with Chase Bank. And I laid this out on LinkedIn, and you can go to that link in the bottom left and read that if you'd like. All right, so how then, if you've got all these benefits of Agile, if it's faster, it keeps you more focused, it allows you to pivot, any of those benefits, how are you going to actually capture them? You have to develop Agile sprints. So what does a sprint look like? Now most of what I'm going to show you, and I'm not going to go into the actual links, I've given them all there for you. These are all documents you can go look at. These are real documents for our secondary research, our conversation scripts, for our qualitative research, for our survey. You can play with it's the Qualtrics preview link. You can play with it as much as you want, take that survey as many times as you want. That's a quantitative survey that was built on conversations, qualitative conversations, that was built on expert interviews and secondary research. That whole method of how to do Agile research is laid out in detail in a past lecture. And these are the documents from it. So I'm going to cover that in this piece, and I just want to make that clear because some of you I see have actually joined those past lectures and some of you have not. There are 4 documents that this is related to. The first is a monthly sprint Gantt chart. This is what it actually looks like. And we're going to look at that on the next slide. But the other 3 documents that are worth digging into, if you have time, the secondary research, how do you go out and pick off all the information that's already there about your problem? Your customer experience problem is not unique. There are huge components that overlap with other people. Well, how have they solved it? What have they done? What could you learn just from 2 hours with Google? Well, what about expert interviews and in-depth interviews with customers or competitors' customers? And then what about quantitative surveys? All of the documents for that are laid out because I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to show you an example, but I'm going to talk mostly about how you can start to develop this internally and start to deploy it in your own processes. So this is a monthly research sprint Gantt. If you don't know what a Gantt chart is, this is also something that came out from that product management Agile background. On the left is a vertical list. That vertical list is tasks specifically. What needs to happen? Okay, we need to complete secondary research. Then after that, we need to program a mini quant in Google Forms. And you'll see if you go and dig into this how that's related to those other documents. We need to do expert interviews, so we're going to need a script. Well, each of those tasks are tied to milestones or phases or stages, whatever term you want to use. That's where the color coding comes in. But vertically, one has to happen before the other, and so on and so on and so on. And then to the right, what it shows is, in each column, the days that this will be completed. So you can visually see how the project will lay out over time. This kind of visual is so helpful for people who are working on a project. And so if you're going to do any sort of sprint system, Agile is usually built on a sprint system. And this is a Gantt of a 1-month sprint. This is the qualitative phase, quantitative phase, or stages, I should say, the analysis stage and the reporting stage. What are the things that have to happen? When are they going to be done? And then beyond this, you can start to assign directly responsible individuals, things that we've talked about in some of the other lectures, specifically related to the SMART goals. This is all built around that. So you can go to that link and you can interact with this actual document. Now, this was made in Excel as a visual tool for you. I encourage you instead to use something like project management software. Now, product managers and project management are different things. There's a lot of overlap, there's a lot of shared skill sets, there's a lot of shared knowledge. But project management by itself is something that you will not adopt successfully, any sort of agile approach, without a very, very clear system to support it. And project management allows you to create Gantts. This is Spera.io. They're actually, for disclosure purposes, they are a current and former Emperitas customer. We have been helping them since before they were an idea. We helped them with product market fit. We helped them with user acceptance testing. We helped them with marketing optimization. This is a tool built for individual workers to manage their time, especially if you're a freelancer, because there's invoicing and payments built into this. But as far as product management goes, we've used everything out there. If you want a simple thing to start, this is the right program. Go to Spera.io. I think they have still a 30-day free trial before you get into the monthly billing. It's very inexpensive compared to the other tools that are out there for product management, like Asana is one, Basecamp is another, Trello is another. And the trade-offs that you make are, there are systems that are built on sort of a bullet point outline kind of approach, like Asana, where you have tasks and subtasks and sub-subtasks. And then you have things like Trello, where it's more visual. It's more like the Kanban approach, where you're using Post-it notes on a wall. And you just have to figure out what system works for you. Give Spera a try. I think you'll figure out if this one works for you very well. It's very simplistic. You create milestones, you create tasks, you can visualize those, you can assign them to directly responsible individuals, you can put timelines on things, you can put dependencies in place, you can track time within it. You can see visually what is going on. You won't move agilely, quickly with customer experience research without a system like this in place. So, and I'll get into this about the baby steps in a moment, but project management software is your friend for this purpose. Another is just having that accountability. If you decide not to use a project management software, fine. People should still know who's in charge of what portion, who owns what, who's responsible for what are clear expectations. This all gets back to the SMART goals win. And so if you go to that link in the bottom right, getting to quick wins with data, that's our YouTube video. That process is laid out. Go through the SMART goals process. It will force you to identify a directly responsible individual. It will force that directly responsible individual to have a clearly defined measure of success, the data or processes that will be included, the dependencies that are involved, how the information that's going to be generated from this process will be used. Again, you have to have a clear system, and this is in part because you do have to enforce it. If someone doesn't do their job in an agile sprint that's 2 weeks long, it is immediately obvious. So then you have the question that you have to answer. Well, you're going to be nice and say, oh, it's okay that you missed your deadline. No, we're fine. We'll make it work. Or you're going to hold their feet to the fire and say, you just delayed the entire team. And now watch this happen on the Gantt chart as we shift everything to the right because of you. That's not always fun to do. It's necessary. And as long as you have clear rules, people are willing to participate in these kinds of systems. If the rules are arbitrary or they're going to get punished, then they're going to start to hide stuff. And we'll get to the culture comment here in a moment about whether you can even do Agile as a culture. If your culture is one where mistakes get buried instead of brought immediately to the surface, then this kind of accountability will not work because people won't be honest. They won't be they won't have radical candor. Now, assigning people and giving dates is one thing, the enforcement's another. These don't now have to be aggressive, horrible conversations. Having regular stand-ups, usually every 2 weeks, but it depends. If you're on a 1-month sprint, you might still do these every week, or you might even do these daily. Some people do daily sprints, daily stand-ups, even if they're on a 2-week sprint. What needs to happen? What is being held up? Who needs assistance? Just a quick, all of us talking about those 3 things, it's amazing how fast all the typical failures of projects go away. You really should try to focus on things that are holding up progress. So when you're going through this, asking people, what do you need, will usually uncover when a problem is there or a pivot is necessary. Now, we also have this rule in Emperitas, and I've talked about this in some of the past lectures. If you can't find something in 30 seconds related to what you're doing, this whole system, if you don't know where it is, in a file, in an email, wherever it is, if you can't go find it for someone in 30 seconds, it's not organized. And we're back to a system that moves fast has to be well organized. This relates to deliverables, this relates to files, this relates to people's access, this relates to definitions. Can we individually quickly find answers to questions on our own related to this work? If the answer is no, and 30 seconds is like, run a stopwatch and see. 30 seconds is not a lot of time, but it's definitely enough if you're organized to find something. This is a good standard to hold yourself to and to test whether or not you're delivering from a performance standpoint. Okay, so that's what an Agile sprint looks like and requires. How would you then become Agile in your customer experience? Because again, I pointed out at the beginning of this, most people are not doing this. Agile methods have not been broadly adopted by customer experience professionals. They are still locked into the traditional Malhotra type market research approaches, which are very slow. They're thorough, but they're very slow. So how do you then make this transition? Well, the most important point is that this is not like ripping a Band-Aid off. This is not going to happen immediately. You should test it in a controlled environment and make sure that this works, because your culture can stand in the way of a lot of the progress for this. One of the reasons startups have been successful in these methods is that they did not have to fight the same kind of organizational, behavioral lock-in that already exists with whatever company it is that you work for, because it's there. Hopefully it's a good environment where people can be honest and transparent, but it could be one where people bury failures. Maybe you can change that. I'm a little skeptical that you can often change this stuff. I'm hopeful that you can, but it takes a lot of work. And you're not going to do it by just suddenly saying, we are now Agile and everything we're going to do is on a 2-week sprint. Instead, focus on a small, quick win that you can demonstrate. That, hey, we made this change and this is what happened. That will encourage other people. It will pique their interest at least, and increase the likelihood that you succeed in making this transition. Now, any larger project, even if you still have some of these very large projects, there might still be things that take 10 months, 4 months. I said at the beginning about things like discrete choice modeling. You're just not going to do them in 2 weeks right now with given technology. Well, you can still take a 10-month project and break it up into sprints, 20 sprints. What's going to happen in the first sprint? What's going to happen in the second sprint? Forces you to be clear, forces you to get organized, forces you to assign directly responsible individuals, forces you to put timelines, gives you all the necessary information for filling this out in project management software so that you can visualize it through a Gantt chart and everybody knows what's going on. Do that in small steps. The other part is being honest about your culture. Is Agile realistic for you? Can you fail fast? Because you will fail. It's one of the benefits of Agile is you'll see quickly, oh, we don't have problem A, we have problem B. We failed. We thought problem A was the problem. We did some quick research. It's not problem A. It doesn't look like it's problem A. Maybe you don't have enough confidence in that first sprint, so you do another sprint and another sprint. You've done 3 sprints, you've had 6 weeks, and it keeps coming back that problem A is not where you should be focusing your attention. You can pivot now. Well, that was a failure, those 6 weeks, just to be clear. Can you do that in your environment? If the answer is no, then this is going to be tough, because you will have to sort out the difference between these two things, normative and positive beliefs. And this gets to, these are philosophical but also economic ideas. So the normative world is the one that you want. It's good to understand that. You can't get to a goal if you don't understand what it is that you want. But it is normative. It's not how the world is right now. It's how you want it to be. The positive is the way the world is. So you might have a bad customer experience right now. That would be the positive reality. The normative reality is we are customer focused. We're determined for customer success. Okay, how are you going to bridge the divide between that positive and that normative difference? Just by identifying them, you can start to do that. The next is mapping all the touch points, and I have to say that I'm surprised by how hard this is for organizations. I think that just like with competitive intelligence, there's a couple things that it doesn't matter who we're talking to, what type of organization, or who they are in the organization. When we talk to them about these things, they basically kind of nod their head and they're dismissive and yeah, we got it, we understand. Like, we're on top of that. The two are competitive intelligence, which they are never on top of. They never know the details that are out there in the public domain through secondary research about their competitors, but they think they do. And then the second is this, the touch points. Oh, we know all the touch points of our customers. When you actually start to have them list them, what you will find is they are very focused on their own touch points. So I interact with a customer when they call in. I interact for tech support, or I interact in my marketing. And then you start to talk about the other touch points. Like, well, what about billing? What about getting an invoice? They're like, oh, and then think about invoice and payments as a touch point. Well, that is a touch point. What about word of mouth recommendations that are coming from other people? You don't even know maybe who those people are. That's a touch point. You've got to map these out. But one of the failures, and this is in that PwC article that was linked at the very beginning of the slides that I said I'd mentioned many times, one of the great things that's in that article that you can go read about is this problem of hyper-focusing on every individual touch point and not stopping and stepping back and looking at them in their totality. You have to have that comprehensive view. And as a way of encouraging you that this is really where you should be focusing, especially if you want to differentiate your customer experience, you have to be able to do this. Just go read about Amazon's, it's called The War on Friction. It's linked there in the bottom left. It's a Forbes article. And Jeff Bezos, beyond using data, I've talked many times about Bezos, the richest person in the world, right? He has not just used data very successfully. The other thing that he's been obsessed about is removing friction from the buying process. Amazon has a patent on one-touch buying. That's how far this war has gone for him. He looked at every single touch point in the buying process and said, how can we reduce them? How can we get them to smaller numbers, to only the things that matter the absolute most? And the whole thing, the story of it is laid out in that article. It's fascinating. Now, the other part where customer experience management goes terribly wrong, and PwC calls this out, I think the term that they use might be fluffy metrics, or there's some term that is meant to express to you that you might be obsessing as a customer experience manager over metrics that don't matter. You might have been told that empathy is the key to everything related to customer experience, and empathy is important. You need to be able to see it from their perspective. But at the end of the day, if whatever it is that you have to deliver as an experience does not bring you in profitable money, you won't be around to do it, so you shouldn't do it. And there isn't this direct connection. It's the number one complaint in that article about the intelligent economy, the intelligent experience economy that's coming, the new era for customer experience that PwC says is coming, is that there is not this connection between things like the value proposition that marketing is putting out there about the brand, and then the actual lived experience of that customer, and then the value that that brings to the company. So if you are only looking at those first one or two pieces, what is the lived experience of the customer and how does that match up to our value proposition? That's wonderful. But you can put yourself into bankruptcy very quickly by delivering an amazing experience with an amazing value proposition that is not economically functional. You have to tie this back to value, and customer lifetime value is definitely the key for that. Now, this is a good example of what can be learned by studying other people's approach. One company started this whole industry-wide trend of sharing the stories of both customer success and customer failure within the company. And the impact that this had for that brand, which is Google, by the way, was massive. It aligned all their efforts. It aligned all of their focus. People were constantly thinking in their own jobs about how it was affecting the customer experience. You need to be sharing these stories. Now, when you're using Agile methods, the stories come quickly. You're going to hear from someone through a qualitative interview. If you want to go follow that link that I gave you to the document that you can basically copy and piggyback on the Emperitas approach to this. You're going to get stories very quickly that can be shared. It's important to share both the wins and the losses. And this isn't just the touchy-feely stuff that PwC was criticizing. In this case, it has a real profound purpose, which is aligning everyone in the organization around the idea, the reality that the customer is the source of revenue. It is the lifeblood through sales of the organization. And so paying attention to their experience is very, very important. So what do we as a group define as a success, and what do we as a group define as a failure? Well, those stories help people start to do that. If you go, I would encourage you to just do this. Try it. Walk around your organization today. I assume that because you're here today, you are focused on some component of customer experience management. So if that's not true, I would still encourage you to try this. It's going to be a fun experiment. Just walk around. Talk to some random people you don't really talk to very often, and ask them what they know about the customer. And I think your stomach is going to sink by what you hear. Because the reality is most of them have never even thought about it. That's what you're going to hear. They're going, oh, that's an interesting question. I've never really thought about that. Well, that's why competitors are destroying brands, because they are thinking about it. And they are able to proactively create a better experience for the customer. And then that allows them to capture more market share, which brings in usually higher value customers, not just more revenue, which gives them a competitive position to outbid you on every AdWords search that's being done, and to put more Facebook ads out in front of the public than you, and to pay higher incentives for the research that they're doing for their customer experience management. All the advantages that come along with a competitive position. And they're doing it because they are talking to their customers and listening. The whole organization is aligned around this. So let's recap what we've covered. We talked about the benefits of Agile, the speed, the ability to pivot, the constant focus on what matters, the ability to respond to something that's changing rapidly. Customer preferences are changing rapidly. Agile provides a way for you to stay on top of that. And this is what PwC said you're going to have to do if you move into this next intelligent experience economy. If you go read that, it's going to, within the first couple pages it talks about, these are things that will be served up automatically. It's not going to be people or individuals, it's going to be algorithms. It's going to be algorithms that are highly precise, that are built on really, really good data. Extensive amounts of data, but also really quality data. To know exactly what it is that you as the individual customer want and need to have the best experience possible that the company can profitably provide, it's just going to give it to you without you even having to ask. That was another part of Amazon's success. They pioneered the recommender engine. Oh, you liked buying this? You're going to love buying this also. That was all built on data. Intelligence implies data. But the application is something that is automatically served up. And Marriott Hotels, by the way, has done a very interesting, they've bridged the divide here. They have a team who manually does this. But there is a story about their experience management. If you send me an email, I will send you back the link to the article. My email is just Luciano Pesci. But I will send you a link directly to the article, or you can go Google search, hunt for it yourself. They use a tool. It's actually a company here in Utah called Nuvi. Nuvi is a brand monitoring social media tool. So it will take data from Facebook, Twitter, RSS feeds on blogs, Reddit, anywhere that they can get public information, where people might mention a keyword and they pull that information into you and they display it in what is probably the most beautiful user interface I've ever seen. And it allows you to watch what's going on. It's got sentiment analysis built in, so natural language processing. It can tell you if a comment's positive or negative. But the story that I read about this intelligent experience that's being done manually, not by algorithms, was the team was watching for this, a team of humans. A woman checked in at one of the resorts, I think in Miami, and talked about how she was coming back there for an anniversary or something, 10 years, and they proactively saw this. They sent bottles of champagne and gift baskets and things to the room, and basically tried to test what happens when we go above and beyond for this one person who was commenting on social media. Well, sure enough, they get tons of Instagram photos and posts of this woman when she checked into the room talking about how Marriott had known that this was going on and had provided this proactively. Had huge gains for them. Measurable gains tied to value. So I encourage you to go read that because that's a manual hack for something that will ultimately become individual. This is the purpose of the customer profile lecture that we had 2 weeks ago. How do you build the most complete profile of an individual so you can put them into personas so that you can ultimately interact with them as an individual in exactly the way that they want that's always tied to value for you as a company? Because if you're providing what they want exactly, they'll pay. They're going to be very, very happy to pay. What about an Agile research sprint? I showed you an example of the Gantt chart. I talked about project management. I linked to documents where you can go see all of these things. The key takeaway is organization. You won't adopt Agile sprints without organization. Directly responsible individuals, clear timelines, and enforcement of that system when it fails, which requires a culture of honesty, transparency, and where people can bring a failure forward, and then as a group you can learn from it, pivot, and move on. If you're able to do that, then adopting these Agile methods through baby steps at first, but then through the broad adoption of just moving faster. If I had to summarize the biggest takeaway, if I had to put into one term or one phrase of what the lesson of today is from this lecture, is just move faster. That's the key. Just move faster. People are conditioned to too slow of a pace, and where competition is just continually increasing and the digital transformation is allowing for instantaneous communication, speed is a huge competitive advantage, and Agile methods provide that to you. You can see how that played out in software development through product managers. You as customer, you are managing something, by the way, too. There's actually quite a bit of similarity. As we've looked, as Emperitas has looked within organizations, we usually work with marketing departments, but we work with sales teams, we work with product teams, we work with ops, we work with leadership sometimes. We've seen the different silos within these organizations. There's actually a lot more similarity in the task at hand between product managers and customer experience managers than any other group within the organization. You are both capable of listening to, and are, by the way, listening to customers, but then proactively shaping, based on that feedback, the experience immediately. In fact, if you look at customer experience management, oftentimes you'll find user experience, UX, which is not at all the same thing as CX, but you will find articles that talk about UX and CX all the time. That's because with software tools in particular, or a SaaS product, where you have a physical app of some type that they're interacting with, that user experience is being highly shaped by the user interface. And so a lot of the CX can be UX, but they are distinct things. But these Agile methods were developed and deployed in product management. You don't have to start from scratch. You can learn a ton from how they've approached this because your problems are also quite similar. You need to listen to the customer, you need to respond quickly, and then based on that response, you need to validate that whatever you did that changed the experience led to a better experience for the customer and more value for you as an organization. Okay, with that, we are going to turn to questions. We will also talk about the next lecture coming up, data mapping customer touchpoints. Like I said, this is the second place where most organizations, after competitive intelligence, most organizations believe that they understand all their touch points. And when you then start talking to customers directly about all the interactions they have with the company, and then you bring those interactions back to the company, they say, oh, we had no idea that that was happening. We're going to talk about how you can start to map all of those touch points out, because it's critical to mapping the customer journey. And from the customer journey, you want to then look at personas, and within those personas, they should be tied to value, but you should be able to look at the whole customer journey by the most valuable persona. You can't do that if the touch points aren't mapped. That will be on May 10th, so 2 weeks from today. You can register probably tomorrow at the lecture page, imperitas.com/lecture. With that, we will turn to questions. I think we had one here in the room. Tom, go ahead.
Maybe I'm opening a can of worms. But,
I like cans of worms.
At an organization, there's a top manager kept switching the project management software,
Okay.
which is a big
Not
problem
easy to do.
At least more traditional organizations have many people who are not early adopters. So
they're switching the tool on you, and it's having a really hard effect on the marginal users, people who are just interacting with it, but they're not programming it. They're not. And this is project management software.
Project management software.
Okay, so this is not uncommon. So this is also why I encourage you to start with baby steps. Because if you say, you know what, Spera is the best thing we've ever seen, and I hope you say that after you use it, and if you don't feel that way, email me, because I'd like to hear that feedback. But Spera is the best project management software we've ever used, and you deploy it to the whole company. And Tom's been using Asana the whole time. And Spera is nothing like Asana. And everything that was in Asana, there's a lot of, it's called sunk costs in economics. Right? They're upfront costs that you have to put in that you're just not going to ever get back. Over time, you can sort of erode them in an average sense, but you're not getting back the time that you spent putting everything you needed to do into project management software A, and then when you switch to project management software B, all that sunk cost is gone. Most of them have no way of sharing the information. And this is in part because it's a new industry. So you see this, you saw this with rail. The first railroads were all different sizes. So you'd have rail that had carts that were built for it, and they would get to the end of their line into a new line, and that new line would have a different size gauge or a different size distance between the rails. Well, that means you unload everything and you reload it in other trucks that are built for those other rails. And probably if you experienced this, if you were alive in the 90s and early 2000s, you experienced this with cell phones, with cell phone chargers. And you can still experience this if you go into truck stops. If you go into like a Flying J, you will still find some sort of cell phone charger with 75 adapters. Okay? Why did that go away? Was it regulation? Well, it was actually the market. The market made it go away because all the organizations, Apple and Google, got together and said, people are mad. The customer experience is bad. They don't like the fact that I make my own charger, and I'm making it from an engineering standpoint. I'm saying, where can I fit the charger into my phone where it doesn't affect memory, and it doesn't affect screen size, and it doesn't affect battery life? And I'm making that decision, and you're making the same decision, and because our engineering systems are different, we're getting to different outcomes. And as a result, if I have my phone and my charger, and you have your phone with your charger, and your phone dies, I can't help you. Guess what? That really ruins the customer experience, it turns out. So as an industry, they got together and they started standards. And that's the USB-C is the real first standard where it's been deployed across most of the market. That hasn't happened in project management software yet. It will. There will become some sort of protocol system about what it means to structure projects. So you can move between Trello and Spera if you would like to. Right now, that is extremely hard to do. So my advice is start small, try out a bunch of them, play with them each for a month and see which one you like. Some are very visual. I personally like the Asana approach. I love the task, subtask, subtask, subtask. Like my brain is just like Inception, right? Remember the movie Inception? A task within a task within a task within a task. That's just how my brain works. I love that layout. Other people love the visual cards. I just need to know what it is I need to do. I don't need to subtask it out to 20 levels. I just need to know I need to do it. And so they love Trello. You got to play with those at first and then share it with your team, see what they think. And as that continues and succeeds, spread it out. But the problem that you're hitting on is someone at the top said, this is what we're going to do, let's do it. And they got a whole bunch of complaints. So then they said, well, we're going to try this other thing, and we're going to do it. And you as a marginal user are being forced to switch between all these project tools. And I encourage you to completely avoid that problem. All right, we got a written question here. How do you recommend an organization begin to help their team understand all the touch points? Should there be a central document? How do you best share the data? Or do silos impede the process? Or what are 3 key things you recommend? Okay, let me break this out into each piece quickly. The first part is how to understand all the touch points. So you need to have conversations with each of the departments within your organization and ask them how they interact with the customer. So if you take an org chart and you go around and you talk to your IT department, how do you interact with them? Oh, we get calls, we get tickets, we get these things. Okay, and then you go to the marketing department. How do you interact with the customer? Oh, we have different audiences set up in our Google Analytics. So once they become a customer, they start to see a different batch of ads in our retargeting and our targeting than the existing customers. Those are different touch points. So you can go through it from the org chart standpoint. The other is talking to the customers. Go ask them, because this is where, when you're talking to their department, like you'll get to accounting and they won't think about the fact, not necessarily, but it's been rare, that they would think about the fact that they're sending an invoice every month to the customer. Okay, that's a touch point. Did that customer get the right invoice? Did that invoice have the right information? Was that invoice being automatically generated by a software tool, which is how like 99% of invoices are generated? Spare, by the way, will let you do automatic generation of invoices built on the tasks that you outline. So if you have a project, you have milestones, you have tasks, and you log your time, and you put a value to that time, Spare will actually automatically calculate an entire invoice for you, and then can automatically send it and get automatic payment from one touch back and forth with the client. Okay, well, you as an accountant might not know that there's all those touch points that are being done in the process, but when you go talk to the customer, they're going to come right out. You're going to see them immediately. They'll tell you what those were. All right, and then should there be a central document? Yes, I think that the more that you can centralize information into a concise set of documents, the better. So you will see the secondary research document that I linked to in the slides earlier. It has specific layouts, specific columns. All that information is centralized in one place, including information about who put it there. So that if we have a question about something, we can trace it back to whoever found it. But yes, a central document. And then how do you best share the data? I think that is unfortunately too big of a question to answer today, because that gets into user access management. There is an article on my LinkedIn account. If you go look at my LinkedIn, you look at the articles, there's one called Your Data-Driven Plan of Attack for 2018. And it will talk about the data maturity stages. But the reason that that's too big of something to discuss is it'll depend on where you are in your data maturity stage. And then from that, you're going to have a user access management. And that gets to data governance. And most companies who are early in their data maturity stages, meaning that they're at the human reporting stage or they're just starting to do some dashboarding, they do not have any sort of data governance in place. They don't have rules that someone can look up, protocols, processes about de-identifying data and who can share data and where data needs to live, and if it's on your machine, what needs to happen with it. There are no rules about that. And if those rules don't exist, then user access to the data definitely doesn't exist. So it's unfortunately a little bit too big of a question, but that would be a good future lecture. So we might do something about the data maturity stages in about a month or two. And then, do data silos impede the process? Absolutely. And I think this is where customer lifetime value is the key. So A quick side note, in the history of Emperitas, we really started as a traditional market research company. And one of the things that we realized is that analytically, because we're all economists, we were leaps and bounds ahead of traditional market researchers. And so it was actually hurting our brand credibility to say that we were doing market research. So we pivoted mostly into data analytics. And then from that, what we started to see both from the market research work we did and from the analytical work we did is that groups within organizations, and I said this before, it was usually marketing departments, but we've had sales departments, we've had product teams. They would bring us in and they'd want to solve a problem that was within their silo. And we would say to them, that's okay, if you want to solve this problem, that's great that you have data sets A, B, C, and D, but what about this other data that's from this other silo? We're going to need that too. And they'd be, oh, we can't get you that. Well, why can't you get that for us? Like, oh, they won't give it to us. Well, why won't they give it to you? Well, we don't play nice with them. Sales and marketing, this is the worst, by the way. But even product seems to be wanting to share lots of data with the rest of the company, but sales and marketing, there's a lot of animosity. And I think the key is that there was no feedback. It was always about, hey, we as marketers want your sales data so we can be better at marketing. There was no value add back to the sales team for giving up that data. And this is where customer lifetime value changed everything for us. Because as a company, we would hear this all the time, oh, you want to optimize cost of acquisition? What's a click worth? How many clicks turn into clients? And how many clients turn into what revenue? And what revenue turns into what recurring revenue? What's their actual value? We can't just tell you how to optimize. Every optimization problem in economics has two parts. You have the objective function, the thing you want to either maximize or minimize, and then you have the second part, the subjected to constraint. So in microeconomics, your objective function is utility. How do I consume goods to be happier and healthier and better? And I'm constrained by the fact that I only have so much income and the price of the goods I want to consume is set by the market. And so my optimization problem involves both the objective function and sometimes what's called the cost function. That's a really bad term because in economics, your cost function is composed of the result from the objective function, which is a minimization of cost subject to some production output. But in data science, it has come to be called the cost function. So you will have some objective that has to be constrained. If you're only looking at one or the other of those, you're not going to be very successful. And CLV forces you to look at both. And to do it successfully, you have to get marketing data, sales data, product data, and customer experience data. You have to have data from across the silos. So it necessitates breaking them down, but it also brings back to each of them individually a value add. Salespeople want to know that their leads are scored so that they are calling on leads that are more likely to convert. They don't believe in it, by the way. Most sales teams do not believe in data at this point. But when it starts to happen in the background and they start to pick up on it, because there's been some algorithm put in place that is actually lead scoring, suddenly they're excited because they're converting more. So now there's a buy-in. Oh, I gave up my data, but I got something back. So yes, the silos are an impediment, and to break them down, you're going to have a value to get back them. All right, I think we got time for one more question in the last 3 minutes.
What was that Nuvi you were talking about?
Nuvi,
And how do you spell it?
Nuvi. And they have the unfortunate problem that Garmin, I think it's Garmin, has a GPS system called the Nuvi. So if you just Google them, you might end up getting a Garmin. Depends who's better at their SEO at that moment. But Nuvi is amazing. It is a social media monitoring tool. You pay by the mention, so you pay by the number of tweets you're scraping, or you pay by the number of Facebook posts that you're scraping. And I shouldn't use the term scraping because they actually have data pipelines. So there's a company called DataSift. DataSift has these relationships with companies like Facebook that they're the data reseller. And it differs by the source. So Facebook gives you very different data than Twitter. In fact, I mentioned this in a past Dawn of the Data Age lecture series. We have Twitter code. If you email me, I will send you the code that we have written. It is an R Shiny app that you can just get your own API tokens, and you can go on Twitter and you can scrape all day. You can find people who have said things about any topic, any keyword. You can pull all their user data, you can pull all their tweet data, you can pull all their retweet data. Twitter is an open book. Facebook's actually pretty secure, unless you as an individual are giving access to your account. But Nuvi has the ability to get some de-identified aggregate demographics and interests for things like topics that you might want to post about on social. It also has the ability for you to respond within the tool to something. So if you see a negative comment, it shows up as a red bubble in their timeline. You can click on it. It will show you all the other tweets or likes or mentions or other things that it's connected to. And then it will allow you, if you wanted to respond directly to it. Yeah, Nuvi is very cool. They're just down in Utah County. All right, that wraps it up for today. We will see some of you on May 10th. Go register at imperitas.com/lecture when we talk about data mapping the customer touchpoints. Thank you again for joining today. Hope you have a great week.